I'm a trucker, and I fatally hit Bigfoot at 1 a.m. while driving at over 100 miles per hour. I thought that was the end of the Sasquatch, but what happened next gives a new meaning to terrifying. Because of the trauma that Bigfoot caused me, I will never drive my truck on Highway 2 at 1 a.m. ever again. My name is Cal Pruitt. I have been driving long-haul freight for 19 years. I have driven every major route west of the Rockies, as well as in all the conditions you can think of. The night started in Everett. I picked up a refrigerated load at 11:30 and took 2 east out of the city. Highway 2 through the Cascades is a route I have run more times than I can count. Stevens Pass, the long descent on the east side, the valley floor opens up, and you pick up speed, and the road straightens. I know every mile of it. I know it well enough to know when something is wrong with it before I can see what is wrong with it. That's the thing I want to be precise about, because precise is how I talk when I need to be believed. The wrongness registered before the impact, not long before, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4. But there was a quality to the road ahead of me that my body clocked before my eyes could identify it. 19 years of driving gives you that. The road tells you things before your conscious mind catches up with what it's saying. What the road was telling me at 1:14 in the morning on the straight section east of Stevens Pass was, something large is in the right lane. I had time to lift off the throttle. I did not have time to brake, not meaningfully, not from 100 miles an hour in the 1.5 seconds between when I registered the shape and when my truck hit it. I am going to describe the impact precisely, and I am going to note where precision runs out and something else begins. The shape was in my lane, center of the lane, standing upright, not crouching, not crossing, standing with the specific vertical of something that is not afraid of the road and does not expect the road to be a threat. I had the high beams on. At the moment of recognition, the shape was lit by full high beam exposure at a distance of roughly 80 feet, and in those 80 feet, in the fraction of a second it took to cover them, I saw enough. It was tall, taller than my hood line, which on a Peterbilt with a standard sleeper puts the cab front at roughly 8 feet. I saw it above the hood. I saw the silhouette of something that stood above my hood line and was wide at the shoulder in a way that nothing that stands that tall and is that wide belongs in the right lane of a highway. I saw an arm, not a front leg, not a wing, not a branch, caught in the headlight wash doing something optical that the brain misreads in low light. An arm, the hang and proportion of an arm attached to a shoulder in the way arms attach to shoulders. One arm. That is all I had time to see before contact. The impact was not what I expected, and I want to be precise about this too, because I have hit large animals before. I know what a large animal impact sounds like, feels like, what it does to the rig. An elk strike is a sound like a gunshot and then a heavy drag. A deer is a crack and a bump and then silent. Both produce instant loss of control pressure on the steering. The wheel kick, the whole front of the truck wants to go sideways, you fight it. The impact on Highway 2 was not that. It was heavy. Heavier than any animal strike I have experienced in 19 years. A concussive weight that hit the front right corner of the cab and traveled through the frame the way a wave travels through water. Not a point of impact, but a whole body event. A shock wave through the chassis that I felt in my back teeth and my spine simultaneously. And then it was gone. No drag, no kick of the wheel, no fragment of whatever I'd hit embedded in the grille or the headlight housing. The road ahead was clear. The truck was tracking straight. My speed had dropped to maybe 80 from the deceleration reflex and the impact itself, and the road ahead of me in the high beams was empty in both directions as far as I could see. I pulled to the shoulder at the next wide spot, about a quarter mile ahead. I sat for 30 seconds with the engine running and the hazards on and both hands still on the wheel, because my hands had decided not to leave the wheel yet, and I was not going to argue with them. Then I got out. I walked back along the shoulder to the impact point. I know how far it was because I tracked it on the odometer when I pulled over. The mark was at 0.24 miles behind my stop point. I walked it in the dark with my work flashlight, a 400 lumen beam I carry for roadside inspections. I found the mark on the road first, not a bloodstain. I want to be specific about this because a bloodstain is the first thing you look for after an animal strike, and its absence is significant. No blood, no hair matted into the asphalt, no fragments of anything biological pressed into the road surface the way animal remains are pressed into road surface at high impact. What I found instead was a depression on the asphalt, the right lane, center, at the position I had calculated for the impact point. A depression in road-grade asphalt, material rated to withstand tens of thousands of pounds of repeated loading. That was not a pothole, and was not old road damage, and was not anything the highway surface develops on its own. It was the shape of a foot. 44 degrees on a September night in the Cascades, and I am crouching in the right lane of Highway 2 with a flashlight on on a depression in the asphalt that is the unmistakable outline of a very large foot. Not a tire mark, not a crack. The negative impression of a heel, a midfoot, 5 toes, pressed into road-grade asphalt by something that landed on it or was hit into it with enough force to deform the surface. I measured it against my boot. My boot is a size 12, 11.5 inches sole length. The impression in the asphalt was 17 inches long and 8 inches across at the ball. I stood up and I put my flashlight on the tree line. The tree line on the east side of the pass is dense second-growth fir, 15 feet from the road shoulder, a wall of dark that starts where the gravel shoulder ends. I swept the beam across it. Nothing moved, nothing reflected. I was still standing there, flashlight on the tree line, not moving, when the tree line moved back. Not the trees, not the wind. The darkness between 2 firs at the shoulder of the road shifted the way darkness shifts when something inside it changes position. A mass displacement, the specific visual event of something very large that had been still deciding to no longer be still. I did not wait to see more. I ran. I am 6'1" and I weighed 230, and I have not run, actually run, the full sprint of someone whose body has decided that speed is the only available option in probably 15 years. I ran back up the shoulder toward my truck, 240 feet of gravel shoulder in the dark, with the flashlight swinging because I needed my arms for speed and could not hold it steady. I could hear my own boots on the gravel and my own breathing, and the nothing else was the worst part, because something that large moving through fir forest at night should make noise, and it was not making noise, and the silence behind me was not the silence of something that had stayed in the trees. I want to be precise about what that silence felt like. I have been alone on dark roads at odd hours for 19 years. I know the specific quality of an empty landscape at 2 in the morning, the texture of genuine silence, the way sound behaves when there is genuinely nothing producing it. What was behind me on Highway 2 between the footprint in the asphalt and the cab door of my truck was not that. It was the other kind of silent, the kind that has weight to it, the kind that is not an absence but a presence, the active quiet of something that is choosing not to make noise, that is capable of not making noise, that is moving through terrain in the dark without disturbing it, because disturbing it is optional and it has decided not to. Something very large was behind me, and it was choosing to be silent, and I could not hear it, and I could feel it anyway. 240 feet on gravel shoulder in work boots in the dark. I have no idea how fast I covered it. It felt like both no time at all and an enormous duration, the specific experience of a sprint where the destination is all that exists, and the distance between you and it is pure sensation rather than measurement. I hit the cab door, got it open, got in, got it closed, hit the lock. The engine was still running. I had left it running. In 19 years of long haul, I have never left the engine running when I exit the cab unattended, because the company has a policy, and the policy exists for liability reasons, and I follow it. I had left the engine running because some part of me that had been calculating since the footprint in the asphalt had already decided we might need to leave quickly. That part of me was right. I put it in gear. Then the cab rocked, not the gentle rhythmic sway of something repositioning. This was a single violent lateral impact from the right side of the cab. The whole front end of the Peterbilt moved left, not swayed, moved. A 40,000-pound truck with a full refrigerated load on a level road surface with the engine in gear and the parking brake off, it moved sideways in a single event the way a car moves sideways when it gets T-boned at an intersection. Something had hit the passenger side of my cab while I was still in first gear and barely moving. I want you to understand the physical reality of what I am describing. A Peterbilt 579 with a loaded 40-foot refrigerated trailer has a combined weight at that load of approximately 80,000 pounds. It does not move laterally from a standing start under its own power without the wheels breaking traction, and the wheels were not breaking traction because I was barely moving. What moved that truck sideways was an external force applied to the right side of the cab at a moment when the truck had almost no forward momentum to resist with. Something hit the passenger door hard enough to push 80,000 pounds sideways on dry asphalt. I did not look to the right. I will be honest, I was not capable of looking to the right. My eyes were on the road and my hands were on the wheel, and every available resource in my body was pointed at getting the truck moving, because the truck moving was the only thing I could control, and controlling something was the only thing keeping the rest of me functional. I was up through the gears faster than I have ever worked a Peterbilt in 19 years. 40, 50, 60. The second impact hit the trailer. I felt it through the fifth wheel, the coupling point between the cab and the trailer, the junction that transmits every force the trailer experiences up through the frame and into the cab. Whatever hit the trailer hit it with enough force that the fifth wheel shrieked. That is the only word. Metal under lateral load beyond its rated tolerance makes a specific sound, and the fifth wheel on a loaded refrigerated trailer is rated to an enormous force, and it shrieked. The trailer swayed. Not the ordinary articulation of a loaded trailer on a curve. The whole rear end went right, and I corrected, and it went right again harder, and I corrected again, both hands on the wheel in the full arm brace you use when the trailer is trying to pendulum around and take the whole rig sideways. I have jackknifed once in 19 years on black ice outside Coeur d'Alene, and I know in my body what a trailer feels like in the last second before it comes around. This was that feeling, and I was at 60 miles an hour on a 2-lane mountain highway with nothing between me and the tree line but 15 feet of gravel shoulder. I held it. I am going to tell you how I held it because I think it matters to the account. I did not hold it through skill, though 19 years of driving gave me the reflexes. I held it because letting it go was not an option I was capable of allowing. There are moments in a vehicle, and any driver who has been in genuine danger knows this, when the fear and the function collapse into each other and the body does the right thing, not because the mind has reasoned through it, but because the body has decided that the alternative is not acceptable and has taken over. My hands were correct on the wheel before I had decided to make them correct. My foot was off the accelerator and back on at exactly the right increments. I was a passenger in my own response. The trailer came back into alignment. The fifth wheel stopped shrieking. I accelerated. I held the trailer and I kept the speed climbing, and I looked in the mirror. The right mirror on a Peterbilt is a wide-angle convex unit that covers the full right side of the truck from the cab door to the rear corner of the trailer. At 65 miles an hour in the dark, with my hazard lights still strobing orange off the road, I watched it. Something was at the rear of the trailer. I want to be precise and I want to be honest. I am not going to tell you I saw Bigfoot clearly and in detail in a convex mirror at 65 miles an hour on a dark mountain highway, because that would not be an accurate description of what a convex mirror shows you at that speed in that light. What I am going to tell you is exactly what I saw, and I am going to be specific rather than dramatic about it, because specific is more frightening than dramatic, and the specific is frightening enough. At the rear right corner of the trailer, at a height consistent with the trailer roofline, there was a shape that was not part of the trailer. I know the trailer. I have pulled that trailer configuration on dozens of runs, and I know what the rear corners look like in a convex mirror at speed. The square geometry, the reflective tape, the light, the gap between the trailer body and the wheels. What I saw at the rear right corner was none of those things. It was a shape that was present and then moving and then present again in a different position, and the movement was lateral, across the face of the trailer rear, side to side, with a speed and quality that was not the movement of something attached to the trailer. Something was at the back of my trailer, and it was moving along the back of my trailer, and it was doing it at 65 miles an hour. I watched it for 4 seconds before the road curved left and the mirror angle changed, and whatever was behind me went out of frame. 4 seconds is a long time when you are watching something that should not be possible to do something impossible. I did not reduce speed. I pushed the Peterbilt to 75. The next thing that happened, I have thought about every day since, and I have not found an explanation that holds. The radio came on. I need to be careful here because this is the part of the account that is hardest to report precisely. I had turned the radio off at mile marker 147. I know I turned it off because I remember reaching for the dial with my right hand while keeping my left on the wheel, and I remember the specific click of the dial going from the first position to the off position, and I remember the silence that followed. And I have been a long-haul driver long enough that the presence and absence of radio sound is something I register automatically, the way you register the presence and absence of background noise in a room you know well. The dial was in the off position. I confirmed this afterward, reached over while keeping my eyes on the road and put my hand on the dial and confirmed it was where I had left it, in the off position, not emitting sound. The sound was coming through the speakers anyway, not a station, not static. What came through the speakers was structured in the same way that the sound I would later hear at mile marker 159 was structured. What I realize in retrospect was the same voice or the same source finding a different channel. The radio being off apparently meant something different to whatever was producing that sound than it means to a radio signal. Off was a human category. It was using a different set of rules. The sound lasted 11 seconds. I counted the way you count when counting is the only thing keeping your brain engaged with something other than panic. 1, 2, 3, a specific number attached to each second, a deliberate cognitive act in the middle of something I had no framework for. What it sounded like, I am going to try to describe it, and I am going to fall short of it, and I am going to give you what I have. It was directed. That is the primary quality, not broadcast, directed. The specific difference between a sound that is produced into a space and a sound that is aimed at a recipient. I have heard both in my life, and the difference is not subtle once you have heard both. What came through the radio at mile marker 161 was aimed at me with a specificity that I could feel before I could process it, the way you feel your name called before the sound of it fully resolved. It was not a threat. I have to keep saying this because it is the most important and the most counterintuitive part. I was running from something that had hit my truck hard enough to push it sideways, that had done structural damage to my trailer, that I had seen moving along the rear of the trailer at 70 miles an hour in my mirror. And what came through the radio at the end of that sequence was not anger, and was not threat, and was not pain. It was acknowledgement, the specific quality of a sound that is concluding something, closing a loop, the last thing said in an exchange before the exchange ends, like the last thing said before someone hangs up. The sound stopped at exactly 11 seconds. The radio was silent. The off dial was still in the off position. I drove 75, 80, mile marker 162, 163, 164. I did not pull over. I did not look in the mirror again. I kept both hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road, and I put distance between me and mile marker 143, the only way available to me, which was speed and time and the 19 years of muscle memory that kept the rig on the road while the rest of me was somewhere else entirely. At mile marker 170, 7 miles past the impact point, I realized the trailer had stopped swaying. The fifth wheel was silent. The right mirror showed nothing but road and tree line and the long orange pulse of my hazards disappearing around the curve behind me. The road ahead was straight and empty and dark, and there was nothing in it. I pulled over at the first wide spot past mile marker 170, 7 miles from the impact point. I put the parking brake on and kept the engine running. I sat in the cab with both hands still on the wheel and the hazards going, and I did not move for what I believe was close to 5 minutes, though I did not look at the clock and cannot give you a precise number. What I can tell you is that my hands were shaking, not the small tremor of cold or fatigue, full hand shaking of adrenaline moving through a system that has been at emergency capacity and has not been told it can stop, and that I did not get out of the cab until the shaking had reduced to the point where I trusted my hands to hold the flashlight without dropping it. When they stopped, I got out. I walked the right side of the truck from the cab to the rear of the trailer. I was looking for contact evidence, paint transfer, scoring, biological material, anything that documented what had been alongside this truck for the past 7 miles. The passenger door first, the lower panel below the window, had a dent, not scraped, not scored, pressed in, the metal displaced inward in the specific way that metal deforms under blunt, high-force contact from something broad rather than sharp. The approximate shape and size of a very large hand, though I am not going to tell you I could confirm that from a dent in sheet metal. What I can tell you is the shape was not the geometry of a road obstacle or another vehicle, and the force that produced it had come from the right side of the truck, laterally, not from below or above. I photographed it. Then I walked to the trailer. The right rear corner of the trailer had structural damage to the corner rail and the rear door frame, not cosmetic. Structural, the kind that requires a body shop, not a touch-up. I later described it to the repair facility as consistent with a side collision. The shop foreman said it looked like the trailer had been struck by a guardrail post at speed. I told him that was the best explanation I had. He looked at the damage for a while and then stopped asking questions, which is what a good shop foreman does. On the road surface behind the rear trailer axle, in the loose gravel at the edge of the shoulder, I found 3 footprints, not 4, not 2, 3. The count of something that had been running, had stopped, had stood, had turned around, and gone back the way it came. The impressions were deep in loose highway gravel, deep enough that when I pressed my thumb into the nearest one, I could not find the bottom. 17 inches long, 8 inches across at the ball. The same foot that had pressed itself into road-grade asphalt at mile marker 143. Now in gravel, 7 miles east, at the point where this thing had decided to stop following me. The point where it had decided to let me go. I stood at the rear of my trailer on the shoulder of Highway 2 at 2:45 in the morning with a flashlight on 3 footprints in gravel, and I understood that the distance between mile marker 143 and mile marker 170 was not 7 miles. It was a decision. Something had made a decision at mile marker 170 that it had not made at mile marker 143 or 144 or any of the miles in between. It had followed me for 7 miles and then it had stopped, and the 3 footprints in the gravel were what the stopping looked like. I took 14 photographs. Then I got back in the truck. I drove to Spokane. I delivered the load at 5:58 in the morning, 2 minutes inside my delivery window. I unhooked the trailer, filed my paperwork, ate a meal I do not remember eating, and drove the Peterbilt back to Everett alone. On the return run, I went through the same stretch of Highway 2 in daylight. I pulled over at mile marker 143 and walked to the impact point. In full morning light, the footprint in the asphalt was unmistakable. A depression in the center of the right lane, 17 inches long, 8 wide at the ball, with smooth curved walls and a depth my palm could not reach the bottom of. The edges were not cracked. The surrounding asphalt had not fractured the way asphalt fractures under mechanical impact. It had simply yielded, the way material yields when the force is greater than the resistance, and the force is evenly distributed rather than concentrated. Like pressing a thumb into warm putty, except this was cold September asphalt, and the night it happened was 44 degrees. I photographed it again. Then I drove back to Everett. I have not told dispatch what happened. I had the passenger door dent pulled at a body shop in Monroe and paid out of pocket. I told the technician I clipped a concrete barrier. He pulled it without follow-up questions. The trailer damage I reported as a side swipe at a different facility. I was deliberate about using two separate shops. I am not going to be careful about what I say next. I hit a Bigfoot at 100 miles an hour, and it did not die. It absorbed an impact that would have killed an elk 3 times over, stood up, and came after me. It hit my cab hard enough to push 80,000 pounds sideways on dry asphalt. It hit my trailer hard enough to require structural repair. It kept pace with my truck at highway speed and communicated through a radio in the off position, and the communication was not noise. It was directed, structured, and aimed at me specifically. And then at mile marker 170, it stopped. It left 3 footprints in the gravel to document where it stopped. The same foot, the same 17 inches, the same depth. And then it turned around and went back the way it came.